All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for making the time to join me today. I know we've had an exciting summer of World Cups and Broncos training camp starting, but I know for a fact this is the moment you've had circled on your calendar, the date and time. You've been waiting to talk about this exciting topic. And I'm excited to be here, and you should be excited too, because what we're going to talk about today is the retirement income source that you have been paying into for literally your entire working career. And I would argue you might not know so much about. So hopefully we can change that today and teach you some more about this important retirement income pillar. My name is Danny Kellogg. I am an advisor here with Prosperion Financial Advisors, and I've been here for about 5 years. Just to share a little bit of my background on this topic specifically, before I joined Prosperion, the last firm I was at, I had the opportunity to join and start a financial planning specialist team. Think of it as like a Fantastic Four of financial planning. Except it was a lot less superhero and a lot more four nerds in the cubicles in the corner answering every financial planning question that all the clients of the firm had. And honestly, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. My specific topic that I covered on that team was retirement income planning. So that ranged in everything from pension planning to distribution planning, Roth conversion planning, and of course, what we're here to talk about today, Social Security. So it's not an exaggeration to say that I have seen and analyzed thousands of different scenarios of types of Social Security and the decision of when to claim. So I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to boil down that experience and expertise into something that you hopefully take away a few things and leave feeling a little bit more clear about this program and what's important about it, and a little more confident in the decision that you or loved ones might make going forward. I want you to know we are recording this session. So a few days from now, the replay will be made available and emailed out to all of you. So you'll have access to all the slides and all the facts and figures that we go over. I do have a prepared presentation, and then we will be leaving time for questions at the end. And the way that we'll facilitate that question and answer is to email me directly throughout the presentation any questions that you have. So I have my email address up here on the screen. It's danny.kellogg@lpl.com. Again, danny.kellogg with two L's and two G's at lpl.com. So feel free at any point that a question pops into your mind, send it over to my email, and at the end of the presentation, we'll spend some time going through the questions that have come up. So what are we going to talk about today as it relates to Social Security? We're going to cover a lot of ground. The first and foremost thing is the elephant in the room of how well funded is this program? And do I need to be concerned that it might not be there for me in the future? So we'll talk about that and then get into some recent updates, a law that changed that impacts a certain portion of the population, and just some key facts and figures to know when it comes to Social Security. We will, of course, talk about the claiming decisions and what goes into when should I actually start this benefit and what's important to be thinking about, what might not be so important to be thinking about. And we'll cover a lot of ground of the various types of benefits. So obviously, if you're a primary worker and you have an earnings history, you have your own Social Security benefit and record to look at, but there are other individuals that can claim benefits on your record. So that would include spouses, it includes divorced spouses, and it includes widows and widowers, as well as individuals that are disabled and in some cases, children. So we'll talk about those types of auxiliary benefits as well. And then touch on a few more useful things to know. For example, how Social Security is taxed, try to shine a light on the way that works. And then things to know if you're potentially considering starting Social Security and continuing to work. There's some important things to know there. So a lot of ground to cover, and I hope you enjoy it. Like I said, please feel free to send over any questions that you have along the way. So kicking things off, let's start with one of the most common questions that I get, or I should rephrase that, one of the most common assumptions that folks I'm talking to state to me, which is Social Security is going away. It's not going to be there for me, right? And the truth is there a funding challenge facing Social Security? Yeah, absolutely. There's some things that need to change. Am I concerned that it's going to go away entirely and not be there in the future? No, I am not. And we'll talk about how it's funded and why I feel that way, especially for those who are either approaching or in retirement and about to start or already receiving benefits. I will go so far as to say I think it's reasonable to assume that your benefits will continue to be there in the amount that's projected over the next 10, 20 years of your lifetime. Could that look different for my generation, those who are still working, or my daughter's generation? Yeah, maybe that looks a little bit different. But if we dig into where is that actual funding challenge coming from, a lot of it comes back to the demographics. So what this chart is showing us is the ratio of people in the workforce relative to those receiving Social Security benefits and how that ratio has shifted pretty dramatically over time. So when Social Security was a brand new program back in the 1940s, there was over 40 workers paying into the program for every one individual receiving benefits. That has steadily declined over time to where today there's less than 3 workers in the workforce per one individual receiving Social Security benefits. And there's a lot of drivers for that, mostly demographics. So we have, in general, an aging population. There are thousands of individuals that not only retire every day, but become eligible to start claiming Social Security benefits. And people over the last few decades have been having less kids. The fertility rate is going down. So by that nature, there's less individuals in the workforce. So there is a challenge, both demographically and just based on how many people are projected to be able to start taking benefits over the next few years. But let's go back to the headlines that you see, where the daunting thing that Social Security is going away or it's going to be depleted. What that is really focusing on is one source of how Social Security is currently funded, that being the OASDI trust fund. And that's essentially a fund of excess reserves of all of the funds that have been paid into Social Security over the many decades it's been in existence and haven't had to be paid out yet. There are technically 2 different trust funds that make up that OASDI. One is specific to the retirement benefits, Social Security. OASI is the part that refers to that. And one is the disability fund. And just as a note, that disability fund is currently projected to be stable well over 100 years from now. It's that retirement fund and that demographic shift that we talk about that seems to be at risk of being depleted in 2034 or 2035, somewhere in that range. So what that simply means is this excess fund that has been helping to cover Social Security benefits will at some point likely be depleted. Now, I mentioned that that is one source of how Social Security is funded. The other source is through payroll taxes. So, as I mentioned, over your entire working career, you've likely been paying into Social Security, and maybe you just haven't paid that much attention to it. But every paycheck that you get, a portion came out for Social Security taxes and Medicare taxes, and your employer also paid a portion of taxes into the Social Security system. So that payroll tax that's coming from employees and employers is that other source of revenue available to pay out benefits. And that's where a shortfall does come in. It currently projects that there's only about 83% of the needed funds coming in from workers and employers compared to how much needs to be paid out. So another way to look at it is $1 is going to be paid out in benefits, and there's only 83 cents coming in. That represents a 17% shortfall. And certainly that is concerning, and it's absolutely something that needs to be addressed. But what's important to know is there are ways that we can address this problem. I would not hold my breath that the problem is addressed in the next couple of years. It will probably be kicked down the road until the very last minute. But what can potentially change is, for example, how much the current workers and employers pay into Social Security as a percentage of their paycheck. So the current rate that you as an employee pay into Social Security is 7.65% of your paycheck. Your employer matches that. So another 7.65% goes in. If you're self-employed, you get the joy of paying both the employer and the employee, and you pay in 15%. So naturally, that's one lever that could be pulled, and maybe politicians will say, hey, we need the current workforce to pay more, or employers to pay more in payroll taxes to help make up this funding deficit. Another area to look at that relates to this payroll tax is there is currently a limit on how much of your income is subject to the Social Security tax. For 2026, that maximum is $184,500. So essentially, if you're someone that has a salary of 250,000, any dollar you make over 184,000 is not currently subject to that payroll tax. Maybe that's another lever that gets pulled to either raise that limit, eliminate it altogether, or institute a second set of tax schedules, kind of like the Medicare surcharge tax, where if you make over 300,000 or $500,000 a year, that income you earn over that amount is once again subject to the taxes. Obviously, no one wants to pay more taxes in their payroll, but that's the reality of how we could potentially make up for this shorting fundage. So again, it's something to be aware of and keep an eye on, but look at it with a level head and understand that yes, there is a challenge ahead. Yes, there is projected to be a shortfall of funding, but there's also things that can be done to make up for that. And hopefully we find a way to address that sooner rather than later. So back to this facts and figures. A couple other important numbers to know, in addition to how much you're paying in as an employee. How do I actually qualify for Social Security? What is that based on, and how is my estimated benefit actually calculated at the end of the day? So the first thing to know, you can see a quarter of coverage here at the bottom. In order to qualify for any sort of Social Security benefit, you simply have to have enough quarters, which is about 40 quarters or 10 years of work history in order to qualify. And the amount you have to earn per quarter in order for it to count is $1,891. And that's risen over time. So for most individuals who have been working for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, you very likely qualify. What your ultimate benefit is based on is your highest 35 years of earnings history. And that 35 years is an important number to know, and it's an important thing to review. The reason being, let's say that you're someone who only has 20 or 25 years of earnings history within the Social Security system. Those 10 or 15 years of zeros will reduce the benefit you ultimately receive. Said another way, if you continue to work another 5, 10 years and you're able to drop those zeros off in favor of a year of wages where you're paying into the Social Security system, that's a nice way to raise your benefit. Another scenario where we need to consider this 35 years of earnings history is if you're somebody who is focused on retiring early. Let's say you've made it your goal to retire at age 55, and that's great. You've worked already for 20 or 25 years, and so you qualify for Social Security benefits. You check what your estimated benefit would be, and it says, hey, you could earn up to $3,600 a month in benefits. What people might miss is that when Social Security estimates that benefit for you, they're assuming that you continue to work at your most recent earnings rate all the way until your full retirement age, which is an age we'll talk about here in a minute. And so if you are someone who retires at 55 and the Social Security Administration says your full retirement age is 67, you're going to end up having 12 years of low or no income, which could result in your ultimate benefit being lower than what was estimated and what was planned around. So just an important thing to be aware of, and if that is your scenario, to work with your advisor on to make sure you have a clear understanding of what benefit you'll actually receive and if it's worth it to focus on retiring early. Now, if you have not logged on to ssa.gov and you're wondering, how do I even know what my estimated benefits are? That's the homework I would give you today, is visit this website, ssa.gov. It's the official website of the Social Security Administration. I'll be honest, I have found it to be one of the more informative and helpful government websites out there, and they've continued to improve their digital and user interface. It used to be the case that every single year you had your Social Security statement mailed to you. Many of you had probably received that. For the most part, they're trying to move that online going forward. So there's some really nice tools when you sign in and create your profile that allow you to review your earnings history, see exactly how many years of earnings you have, make sure they all look accurate, because it is supposed to be updated every single year when you file your income taxes, what your most recent wages and payments into Social Security were. And then it'll give you estimates of not only what your benefits might be at different ages, but if you continue working at your certain rate till certain ages, what how would that impact or change your benefits? And there's also a lot of nice frequently asked questions and different scenarios you can get answers to. So overall, a great tool and a resource. And if you haven't already, spend some time checking it out. What's also interesting to know is, how much Social Security can I actually anticipate in retirement in general? So I've included here the average Social Security benefits being paid in 2026. So for all retirees, the average benefit being paid is a little over $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year. If we consider couples who are both currently collecting, the average between the couple is a little over $3,200 a year. So a little over $37 annually, $3,200 per month, excuse me. And what's important to think about there is, yes, Social Security was designed to be a steady, reliable income source in your retirement. It was never meant to fully replace the income you had when you were working. It was meant to supplement either other pensions or savings and investments and income streams that you have. So we just want to have a realistic handle on what our expected benefits are in our planning process so we can have a nice, solid retirement. Another good feature to know about Social Security is that they do recognize that life gets more expensive every single year. And so they do provide a cost of living increase to benefits. In 2026, they raised benefits by 2.8%. That's not a set number. That is something that changes each year depending on what the current rate of inflation is. So, for example, in 2022 and 2023, when inflation was running really hot, that was a higher increase. And in years of low or kind of typical 2 to 3% inflation, it might be in that range. As advisors here, we talk constantly about how one of the most important risks that we need to consider over a 20, 30-year time horizon is life getting more expensive. The technical term is inflation or loss of purchasing power. So it's great that our Social Security benefits increase, but we also need to have a plan for our other investments, our other income sources. How are they going to keep up and increase with inflation so we can maintain, if not outpace, our standard of living? So I also mentioned earlier that there was a recent law that changed that impacted a certain subset of individuals. And this was a law that passed in January of 2025. So hopefully by now, anybody impacted has already seen their benefits increased. But I wanted to bring it up in case people weren't aware or it made sense for you to reach out to the Social Security Administration to see if it can help increase your benefits. And what it specifically addressed, it was called the Social Security Fairness Act, were two provisions that used to impact individuals who worked in a job that was not covered by Social Security. So they were not paying Social Security taxes on their wages, and instead were paying into another pension through their employer that they were now receiving a pension from. A perfect example of that is the Colorado education system and the para retirement system. So if you're a para employee, you're not paying into Social Security, therefore not accumulating benefits, and you're receiving your pension from para once you retire. Well, what became an issue is it's not uncommon for folks to maybe work 10 years in a system like para or something where they weren't paying into Social Security, but also have spent 10 years in private employment and 20 years and have increased a Social Security benefit through that employment as well. So what these old provisions, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset used to do was reduce the Social Security benefits you receive based on that pension you were receiving from the time you weren't paying into Social Security. And at times, if your pension from the other employer was high enough, it might wipe out those benefits altogether. That GPO or government pension offset would apply specifically to spouses who were potentially receiving spousal benefits or survivor benefits and reducing those benefits if they had a pension coming from another employer where they weren't paying into Social Security taxes. The good news is both of those have been completely repealed. So it's no longer an issue if you had time spent working in a system like para. You can now still be eligible if you have your own earnings history in Social Security to receive that full benefit or to consider things like spousal and survivor benefits that we'll talk more about in a little bit. Hopefully by now, most folks who were impacted by that have reached out to Social Security, recouped those benefits, and experiencing that higher benefit going forward. But if you think this applies to you and you have not reached out to Social Security, it would be worth checking in to see if we can get you a little bit of a raise with that law change. So another important age to know as we start to transition to the claiming decision is what our full retirement age is. And this is not the age at which you desire to retire. This is the age at which the Social Security Administration defines you can now receive 100% of the benefits that you've earned. It's getting a lot simpler. So now, if you were born after 1960, your full retirement age is 67. You can see that for those who had been born in 1943 to 1954, the full retirement age was 66. And if you were born in that window of 1955 to 1959, you got 66 and the joy of doing some math to figure out when the Social Security Administration actually defined your full retirement age. This is an important number to know because, like I said, it determines not when you can start benefits, but when you can receive 100% of the benefits that you would have. So let's look a little bit closer at what that means. For most types of benefits, so your individual benefit, your spousal benefit, the earliest you can claim benefits is age 62. So you're allowed to start benefits then, but if you do, the Social Security Administration will apply a permanent reduction because you started benefits before your full retirement age. So you can see on the left-hand side of the graph here, it's showing us the percentage that you would receive. And on the bottom of the graph, it's showing the age at which you claim. So take, for example, someone born 1960 or later, whose full retirement age is 67. That's when they would be able to receive the full benefit that they've accrued. They could start at 62, but they would only receive 70% of that benefit that they had earned. You can see it's a graduating scale. So as you get closer to your full retirement age, that reduction does become smaller to the point where, at age 66, you're a year or less away from your full retirement age, and you only have an 8% reduction. You still receive about 92% of the benefits. In addition to being able to start benefits early, you can delay benefits past your full retirement age all the way up until the age of 70. And if you do, they will pay you a higher monthly benefit than what your full retirement age amount is. So you can see if you wait all the way until 70, they would pay you about 124% of your full retirement age benefit. So there certainly can be incentives or reasons to consider delaying if you have the financial ability to do so. And we'll talk a little bit more about when it makes sense and what to consider there. An important thing to note is there is no increase past age 70. So there really is not a reason to wait longer than age 70, even if you're still working or someone that plans to live to 110 years old, start taking those benefits at 70, because if you don't, you're just leaving it on the table. The other two lines we see here, the light blue and gold line, those represent spousal benefits and survivor benefits. You can see that they also can be started at age 62, but receive a reduction in what the ultimate benefit is compared to full retirement age. However, important thing to note about spousal and survivor benefits is they do not increase past full retirement age. So there's no benefit to waiting past your full retirement age if you're planning to claim the spousal or survivor benefit. We're going to look at a couple scenarios here in a bit of what to think about as far as when to claiming, but I want to share an example now to start framing this conversation. And the first thing that I want to share when it comes to deciding when to take benefits is avoid absolutes. And what I mean by that is the always delay till age 70, never take at 62. Always take at 62, never wait until age 70. The truth is there really is no appropriate rule of thumb for when everybody should or should not take Social Security. It is totally dependent on your own situation as far as your health, your spouse and their health, your expected life expectancy for each of you, your financial situation, and if you're able to delay benefits. So it really does take a little bit of thought and looking at a few different factors to decide when it's best for me. And I had a great example recently of an individual that I was helping who was kind of scared to start benefits before full retirement age. And their situation was one that they had some great rental properties. It was generating great income, but they still felt a little stretched because if you've ever owned a rental property or even just your own home, there's a lot of expenses and maintenance that go with those types of properties. And so that can make you feel pretty stretched from a cash flow perspective if you, only have those rental sources and are no longer working. And so through the process of working together and helping her decide, hey, should I consider selling one of these properties and what should I do? we looked at it and we sat down and we said, okay, well, you're basically within a year of your full retirement age. So even though you feel like I'm going to get a 70% reduction if I start benefits now, the truth is it's only an 8% reduction. And maybe what you can do is start that benefit, put it in a savings account where it automatically goes in and builds up a emergency fund for you to help cover some of these expenses that are coming in from your rental. And you're not really leaving that much on the table by starting it now. So we talked through those scenarios and a couple different ones of what it would look like if she sold her rental. And at the end of the meeting, she sat there and had this moment of clarity and said, I'm going to start Social Security. And I could just see the relief and the tension lower from her shoulders. And it was so much fun and so enjoyable to be able to help her and understand that, yeah, we're taught that we need to wait to maximize our benefits, but sometimes it's okay. And sometimes it does make sense based on your personal situation to start things a little early. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about a couple different claiming scenarios and what exactly else we want to be looking at in there. So once we know our full retirement age, the other thing we want to know is the other types of benefits that might impact us. So this primarily applies to individuals who are either married, who are divorced, or who are survivors, who are widows and widowers. The first one we'll start with is how the spousal benefit works. And I want to use an example of a couple named Bill and Rose. So let's say that Bill and Rose, married couple, they had 4 kids. Bill was the primary earner. He worked outside of the house for 40 years as a salesman. Rose primarily stayed home to raise the 4 kids. She worked for a little bit before they had kids and a little bit afterwards. So she does have some of her own earnings record, but the higher benefit earner very much comes from Bill. Well, the good news in a situation like this, or even a situation where somebody is married and one spouse did not work outside of the house at all, is that you are eligible to claim the spousal benefit. And what that benefit is 50% of the primary earner's full retirement age benefit. For example, if Bill's benefit at his full retirement age was $3,000, then Rose would be entitled to receive $1,500 per month in the spousal benefit. Pretty significant amount of money that's available. And the way that it works in this scenario, where if Rose has her own benefit available, let's say that based on her own earnings record, she would be eligible for a $700 a month payment. The Social Security Administration will look at that and pay her $700 a month on her own record and an additional $800 a month in spousal benefit to bring us up to that total max available of $1,500. So at the end of the day, once they're both claiming benefits, they would receive $4,500 a month in Social Security benefits. A couple important things to know is that the spousal benefits cannot be claimed until the primary earner has started their own benefits. And this, comes back into that conversation of when should you start. But it's just a good thing to know that you can't start the spousal benefit before. There used to be this really cool loophole called file and suspend, where the primary earner could file their benefits at full retirement age and immediately suspend them so they continue to grow to age 70, which also allowed the spouse to claim their spousal benefits while the other benefits increased. It was a really sweet loophole. It made for a lot of fun planning, and lawmakers caught on and closed it up. So it's something that's no longer available and makes the spousal a lot more simple. The other thing I mentioned earlier that we need to think about is, in addition to not being able to claim until the primary earner has filed for their benefits, there aren't any delays for spousal benefits past full retirement age. So typically there's not a reason to wait past full retirement age. So yeah, this is a good thing to know and kind of compare if you're looking at as a married couple, what a primary or higher earner spouse's benefits are to a lower earning spousal benefit. It's worthwhile to look and see, can I receive more by claiming the spousal benefit? The same is true that there are benefits available for divorced spouses. So let's say in that same example, the spouse that had not worked outside the house as much, maybe only 10 years of an earnings history, ends up getting divorced. Well, they would potentially still be able to claim that spousal benefit based on the primary earner's record. And in order for that to be allowed, you have to have been divorced for more than 2 years in addition to have being married for more than 10 years to the ex-spouse, and you cannot have remarried prior to age 60. So those are the qualifiers. If that's met, then it works very similarly to the spousal benefit, where you can receive up to 50% of your ex-spouse's full retirement age benefit. And even if your spouse is remarried, you're still able to do that. This is probably an example of another reason the demographics are causing a funding shortage, is because if you think about that primary earner, they claim their own benefits. Let's say they've remarried, that new spouse can potentially claim spousal benefits. And then a divorced spouse is also claiming benefits on this one earner's record. Not saying it's a bad thing. Certainly, folks are entitled to these benefits. But that's part of the challenge is you then have three individuals claiming benefits on one working history. So it's important to know. And again, if you're somebody who has experienced divorce or you know someone who is and have your own earnings record, whatever that looks like, what's important is just to compare. Okay, could I receive a higher benefit on my own versus what that divorced spousal benefit would be? We want to make sure you're maximizing the benefits that you receive as much as possible. And then the last type of benefit to know is the rules when it comes to widows and widowers. The Social Security Administration calls these benefits survivor benefits. And there's some really important distinctions to know here that can impact the claiming decision. There's a couple different scenarios on this slide, but the main things that I want you to know is that if both spouses have already filed for benefits, or more importantly, that higher earning spouse, let's say in our example of Bill and Rose, Bill has already filed for his benefits. Maybe he started them at full retirement age. Maybe he delayed until age 70. And let's say he passes away at age 72 or 73. Rose is still alive. What's fantastic about this benefit is that Rose will immediately go from receiving her $1,500 a month in spousal benefit to Bill's amount that he was receiving, the $3,000 a month. And that will continue for the remainder of Rose's life. And so that's really important for couples to think about in planning, especially if there's a scenario where there was a primary earner that has a significantly higher benefit, and if there is an age difference between spouses that can lead to meaningful more dollars received from Social Security over the lifetime of both spouses, if we do encounter a situation where one, especially the younger one, survives the older spouse for a significant amount of time. Another part that's unique about survivor benefits is that they can actually be started earlier than age 62. So you can potentially start benefits as early as age 60. Those are the survivor benefits specifically. So again, looking at that scenario where maybe there was a 10 or 15-year age difference in the spouses, let's say the older spouse passed away in their early 70s, the surviving spouse is in their 50s. They don't have to wait until 62 or full retirement age even to start that survivor benefit. They can start it as early as 60. This is even more important to know because if that surviving spouse has their own earnings history, there is actually an opportunity to collect survivor benefits from age 60 to full retirement age, and their own working history and benefits will continue to accrue, and you can actually switch to your own benefits later on, assuming your own benefits are higher, right? If the survivor benefits are already higher, even at the reduced amount at age 60, you'll stay on those for the rest of your life. But it's an opportunity to collect that income starting as early as age 60 and then switch to your higher own benefits at, say, full retirement age or potentially even 70, since that's your own benefit. So there definitely are planning things to know when it comes to survivor benefits. And if you or a loved one is in the situation, I would encourage you to have a conversation with your advisor to make sure that you have a clear understanding of how these benefits work and what's important for you to consider as you plan for them. So now that we have a good idea of what the full retirement age is, what those different types of benefits are around spousal and divorce spousal and survivor benefits, let's look at a couple different examples of when it makes sense to claim. The biggest things that I want you to take away are in this decision of when to claim, we want to focus on three things primarily. The first is, when do you need the income, right? It's easy to get caught up in all these ages of full retirement age. I can claim at 62, but we often forget there might be a scenario that arises where you need that income earlier than expected. Maybe it's the example I gave earlier, or maybe it's somebody who gets laid off before they plan to retire at full retirement age and suddenly have this gap where they aren't able to go back to work. They're having a hard time replacing the income. When you need the income might be the answer to when I need to claim. But assuming that you have the flexibility, you've done the savings, and you have more of a choice around when to claim, the other things that we want to be looking at are your life expectancy, if you're married, your spouse's life expectancy, and your general family history and health. In general, again, every situation is different, but if we want rules of thumbs for the life expectancy, if you plan to live until your mid 70s, full retirement age makes sense. But if you're somebody that has longevity in your family, and you reasonably expect to live until your mid 80s or your early 90s or your late 90s, that's when the case becomes compelling to delay until age 70 so you can receive that maximum higher monthly payment for the entirety of your life. And in doing so, you actually collect more Social Security benefits over the course of your lifetime than by claiming early. So it pays off to wait 3 years because you have another 5, 10 years of your maxed out benefit. Or again, if there's a couple who either, one is the primary earner and is not expected to live as long, but the younger or lower earning spouse can reasonably expect to survive another 15 years, that can make sense to have one person consider delaying till age 70 as well. On the flip side, if you're somebody who has significant health issues or has really significant family history of not living past your early 70s, well, then that might be an easy answer to not wait. Because what we don't want to have happen is you wait until full retirement age, you delay until 70, and if you pass within a couple of years, and especially if you're not married, you might not even have recouped everything you paid into the system. So it is reasonable to consider starting early if there is concerns or uncertainty around what your longevity is, just so you can start claiming those benefits. I've also certainly ran into folks who are dead set on, hey, I've been paying into the system for 35, 40 years. That's my money. I've been loaning the government for free over that time. The day I can start getting a paycheck from them, I'm going to start it. And if that's your mentality and what you want to do, then absolutely, that is your right and your money that you've paid in. But I think in general, it's worth taking a closer look at, hey, when do I expect to live to? How long does my spouse expect to live? And what are the general ideas there? Certainly, none of us know how long we're going to live. If you look at the reasonable life expectancy table, it is starting to approach the early to mid 80s for both males and females who have made it to age 65. I think the biggest one to look at here that to highlight outside of kind of the generalization is that second example. So where the spouse A is 67, spouse B is 63. This is the one that we've kind of been working with in the Bill and Rose scenario. So if you would have the older and primary earning spouse having more benefits at their full retirement age, then it certainly could make sense for them to delay until age 70 if it reasonably is assumed that the younger spouse will outlive them, because then they can step up to receiving that full $3,000 a month. And even though they can't claim that spousal benefit that would get them to $1,500 a month, they could still start their own benefit at full retirement age. And then when the older spouse files at 70, they would actually receive a bump in benefits by way of those additional spousal benefits. So the big things to think about when it comes to the claiming strategy are your life expectancy based on either health or family history, your spouse's life expectancy based on health and family history, what your benefits are in relation to your spouse's benefits, and then finally, when you need the income and when the income would be valuable to you. Okay, so once you've started your benefits, you probably want to know how much of it you're still paying back to the government. It is the case that benefits are still being taxed. There was a law passed that added a new standard deduction, or an additional deduction, I should say, per individual that's over age 65, that effectively helped to reduce the impact of Social Security being taxed. But in general, your Social Security benefits are still potentially subject to income tax. And it's a nice, unclear formula that our lawmakers put together for us. But essentially what you need to know is that if you make under a certain amount of this provisional income calculation, which is your just adjusted gross income plus 50% of your Social Security benefits and any non-taxable interest. If that number comes in for a married couple under 32,000 or for a single individual under 25,000, then fortunately, you are not paying taxes on your Social Security. If you start to creep up into the ranges you see of 32,000 to 44,000 for a married couple, then 50% of your Social Security benefits will be subject to income taxes. That does not mean you're paying a 50% income tax rate. It's just how much of the benefit you've received will be included as part of your ordinary income. And the most that can be subject to taxes is 85% of the benefit. So if you're married and your provisional income calculation is over 44,000 or single and over 34,000, then 85% of your benefits are included. Again, you're not paying an 85% tax rate. That's how much of the benefits they'll include in your taxable income. The good news you can see is that 15% of the benefits are always going to be tax-free. So this is typically most important to know because it will shift over time as you work or as your spouse stops working and the overall household income picture changes. But it's worthwhile to know that Social Security is still taxable. And maybe those figures are important to look at if you're on that border of potentially being no taxes on Social Security versus 50% or 85%. Okay, moving right along here, just a couple more topics before we get to the questions that we have coming in. If you are somebody that is considering claiming benefits and continuing to work, this is a slide you need to study and understand. So basically, you are still allowed to claim benefits at age 62 at the very earliest and continue to work. But if you do that, the Social Security Administration puts an earnings limit on how much you're allowed to earn before they start actually withholding some of that benefit. The idea is to not have someone who's still working full-time, maybe earning six figures and also collecting Social Security, since it's designed to be a retirement income source. Certainly, there's still room, and they're allowing room for someone who wants to work part-time in retirement or work less, but this is something that we need to know. So for 2026, if you earn $24,000, we'll just round up and say if you earn $25,000 or more, then you potentially will start to have Social Security benefits withheld. Excuse me, the year you reach your full retirement age, that number raises significantly to 65,000. And important to note, once you do reach full retirement age, so let's say you start benefits at 67, you continue working in your capacity as an executive, it doesn't matter how much money you make, you can continue working past full retirement age while receiving Social Security and not be penalized for that. But as we learned in the last slide, that will mean that more of your Social Security benefits are subject to income taxes. So certainly is possible that you claim benefits and work, but if you're under full retirement age and claiming, this is a number we want to be aware of. The other thing that might be helpful to know is the administration does give you a one-time do-over. So let's say there's a scenario where at age 63, you get laid off and you don't think you're going to be able to go back to work. So you start Social Security because you need the income and it was the right choice for you. And then a few months later, you end up getting a job that would put you over this earnings limit. One time, the Social Security Administration will allow you to actually repay all the benefits you received and then continue on as if you had never filed for benefits. So it's only allowed once, and it's important to know that they make you pay back what you received, and it has to be done within the first 12 months of when you originally filed. So not something that I see happen frequently, but I do think that's a reasonable scenario where someone might start benefits early and then realize, oh, shoot, I'm able to go back to work and I want to have a do-over. So last thing we'll touch on here is in relation to some of the other benefits through the Social Security system. The first one is the disability income. So anybody who has their own earnings history is eligible for disability income, and those who have lifelong medical disabilities. What's important to know here is that it is honestly a really onerous and difficult thing to get approved for disability income. I've seen firsthand and heard anecdotally a lot of cases about individuals who you think would be a clear-cut no-brainer, you should be on disability from Social Security. And it still takes, over a year to get it approved and a lot of different calls and forms from doctors. But this is something that is available. And if you do qualify, the way that disability income works from Social Security is once you qualify, they actually start paying you the full retirement age amount that you've accumulated based on your earnings. So it's not reduced at all. They look at your earnings and pay you that full retirement age amount because the assumption is you're not going to be able to return to work. And then that just continues for the rest of your life. Once you reach full retirement age, it technically transitions to a retirement benefit, but the amount stays the same. A couple other pieces I wanted to highlight is there are actually opportunities for children to receive benefits from Social Security in certain situations. This is primarily when there is a parent who is of Social Security age and receiving Social Security, and their child is under age 16 or disabled before age 22. In that case, they can actually have benefits coming in that are payable to the spouse who's caring for the child until they reach age 16. Another benefit to the survivor benefit is if the survivor is raising children who are high school age or younger, that child can actually begin receiving Social Security benefits as part of that survivor benefit until they are either 18 or if they're still in high school, age 19. So I bring this up. It's a very specific situation, but I think it's important to be aware of for yourself or loved ones who might be in that situation. Certainly want them to take advantage of that if they're able to. So I appreciate your time and attention as we went through all that. This is just a quick reference that we've put together a lot of those facts and figures. And I certainly hope you found this valuable. I do see we have a couple questions that came in. So let me see what those are. And like I said, we will have a replay of this. So the first question is, are estimated benefits in today's dollars, or do they assume a COLA increase yearly until a predefined date? So that is a really good question. They are shown in today's dollars, but when you receive a COLA adjustment, those estimates that you see are increased as well for that COLA. So they are shown in today's dollars, but each year when you receive an updated estimate, it does reflect that COLA adjustment. All right. So the other question is in relation to the break-even analysis and what discount rate was used for that calculation. And so if someone can bank their Social Security income and earn a decent interest rate, it seems that maybe that helps to tip the scales in favor of maybe claiming early. That certainly is possible. This is a question that I've been asked before when it comes to, hey, does it make sense for me to claim my benefits and do that early and begin investing or putting it in a savings account? This potentially can work. One of the challenges or one of the factors that we need to look at if we're considering this situation is if you are still working or if your investment income outside of that means that your Social Security is subject to taxes, that obviously raises the hurdle of what you would need your investments to return. For most people, when they're starting Social Security, it's because they need the income. The other situation would be if maybe you start a little bit earlier and that allows you to delay when you need to start dipping into your investments, and those can continue growing. So again, that's why I like to highlight that there is no right or wrong answer to it. There's no general rule of thumb, and it really depends on your personal financial situation and what resources you have available to fund in retirement, or if you do start Social Security and allows you to delay touching your other investments. All of those situations are case dependent, I would say. So let me see, let's check if we have any other questions here. Great. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'll bring back up our quick reference here and just want to once again say thank you to all of you for being clients and friends of Prosperion Financial Advisors. Certainly, if there are any questions about this presentation or specific personal situations that you want to review, feel free to reach out directly to your advisor. I'm happy to serve as a resource to be called in on any case or questions that we have related to it. And just thank you for your time and wish you all the best. Thanks. Take care.